This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to Teach Me Pokemon, the podcast. I'm your host, Corey, and along with my co-host, Jared, we're best friends, been playing Pokemon for a very long time.
All right, everybody, Pokemon World, all of our rabid watchers and listeners out there, we're back with another episode of the Teach Me Pokemon podcast on Rogue Media Network. Jared, we don't shout out Rogue enough for the hard work that Scotty and Mike put into making us sound good and look good, feel good. They may not know what we're talking about when we say Terrapagos or Terrapagos, however we want to say it, but they're great here. How are you in the great state of Tennessee and Murfreesboro right now? How you doing?
I'm doing great. For those of you that don't know, we're recording this just after the primary election in the U.S. And for a lot of people, it feels like a new pack is coming out. You get one set for the next 4 years, and you don't get to choose what's in it.
So you just got to roll with it. You got to roll with it. I will say, you know, there's no fun in the states that we're in, right? Texas and Tennessee, they just call them. They're like,
yeah, it's over.
Trump, like there was no excitement. I would have killed to be in Pennsylvania. That would have been engaging for me, you know, to be looking at my state all night.
Because yeah, for us it feels like, oh, I'm running water into an electric deck. Like, what's the point here?
Yeah,
what are we talking about? But over there, that's some juicy matchups.
There's some juicy matchups. I will say I was semi-entertained. You know, I grew up in Oregon, that's where I'm from. And when the polls closed on the West Coast, traditionally, they're just like the polls close and then it's like the Democratic candidate gets California, Washington, and Oregon. Like they just give it to them. You know, they don't even need to count the ballots. They just give it to them. And it was like California, but then they were like too close to call for Oregon. I was like, what? Like,
that's wild.
Yeah, if Oregon had flipped to Republican, there would have been like definitely an investigation into the state of Oregon.
All I'm saying is, I know he's not on the show anymore, but Ash Ketchum for president. 2028. Ketchum, Brock, Misty, 2028.
2028. He cares about his Pokemon. He will care about the American people. He's
well-traveled. I got to believe he'd be a good president.
And he's old enough now, right? Because he was like 12 when Pokemon came out, right, in 1995. So Ash is at least in his 40s.
He's got to be of legal age in the U.S.
He's legal.
That may be his only thing. I don't believe he's a U.S. citizen. I don't know if we can work on that. That's just something we'll have to look into. But enough about us. What's happening in the United States. We're actually here because we want to talk about what was going on in Dansk. We want to talk about what was going on in Singapore.
Yeah.
And what is happening in the Pokemon world.
Yeah, I'm all about these Premier Ball special events, Jared. I mean, the Philippines, the Premier Ball League. We talked about that last week on the episode. And now we have the Singapore Premier Ball League. Like, Premier Ball League should just be everywhere. I want to go to the Texas Premier Ball League. But Singapore, we'll cover it quick because that was the smaller of the two. 400 players. I think best deck and format got the win, right? I mean, I've said it a couple weeks now. Best deck and format got the dub. Terrapagos with the Dusknoir.
We're gonna get to it. Like I'm super excited to talk about this deck statistically when we look at Dance. But you're not wrong. It is a very good deck. Personally, I'm more of a Terry Tai Wei Zhan fan here in second place.
I figured we'd talk about Terry.
Running the Gold Dingo. I mean, I think he's sipping the same Kool-Aid that we are.
Yeah, Terry's seen the writing on the wall because we've played Gold Dingo in this format. We obviously believe very strongly in it. It's just gonna get better next format. Like that's really once Surging Sparks is legal, that's when Gold Dingo is gonna make a nice little leap. But can we start with his deck real quick, just because we're most familiar with it?
Sure, absolutely.
Kind of an interesting inclusions, I'll say. The Pokemon stand out. 2 Spiritombs, not just one to stop V's, but 2. What's the rationale, Jared? I don't know.
I think it has to be to slow down some of these higher stage 2 decks that rely on Rotom. I think that's one reason. if you see that Rotom hit, but honestly, that means you're trying to go first and spike that Spiritomb or that Buddy Poffin, because usually after one run of Spiritomb, the Charizard, the Dragapult has the pieces that they need. Yeah. So I don't know what else this deck is afraid of. It used to be you were trying to slow down Miraidon, you were trying to slow down things in Mew, like Genesect, but you tell me, what else am I missing that Spiritomb really needs to slow something down right now?
Yeah, I mean, you're the only two super viable Vs that are in multiple decks, right? Would be Lumineon or
Correct.
Bottom. So I suppose you're just making a play for those two cards, like you said, getting the early shutdown, which is probably why you run 2 Spiritombs, not 1, to kind of guarantee that. And then Terry's okay with the Rotom because he's running 4 Arven, which we didn't run any Arven in our builds, because he's going for the Technical Machine evolution play, just like a Gardevoir deck would that runs the Arven, and they always have it, right? Guardy always has the Arven. And so they're wanting Spiritomb, attach an energy, and evolve to 2 Goldengos to just create more of a wall, but then also get your deck going, and then they start drawing cards. So it's interesting. I don't know, Jared, if this deck would have held up, say, in Louisville at the regionals you and I played in about a month ago. I don't know. I don't know. He had 1 rigid band, adding some defense there to the Goldengos. The Temple of Sinnoh and the Pokestop, which is great. No jamming tower because he wants to do the Technical Machine, so I get that. He went with your Aroma, right? Yep. Instead of the Prime Catcher, he went with the Aroma. So I don't know, man. It was cool. I'm glad it got second. Don't think this would have held up in a bigger regionals.
I agree. I don't know if it would have, but it just seems like he figured out a way to make this really consistent deck even more consistent. Like, it's surprising to me to see the Evolutors and the Aroma, right? And 2 of the Spiritomb, but it just says, like, I'm going broke for consistency, and that paid off, right? In this situation, that paid off. So kudos to him for going all in on one concept.
Yeah, kudos to him. Clearly he got second, so he must be doing something right. But yeah, anyway, the deck that won, Terapagos, Dusknoir. This deck is just a beast. I think at this point, and we're going to touch on a deck like this in how do we say it again? Dansk.
I don't know how it's supposed to. That's how I say it.
Dansk. We're going to talk about a similar Terapagos build in that tournament as well that also was running the 2 Bouffalants. And I think right now this deck kind of has 2 camps at this point. It's, do you run the 2 Bouffalant or do you not run the 2 Bouffalant? Right, Jared? I mean, I don't know. There's like little variations, I guess, beyond that, but that's kind of the 2 biggest variations of this deck. And the winner here decided to run the 2 Bouffalant. So do you think that's going to be the preferred way to run this deck?
I mean, it's hard to talk about this without talking about our finals match featuring Mr. Tord Reklev, because in both the semifinals and the finals, you saw what people want to do when they see the Bouffalant drop.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Let's talk when we get there.
Okay.
That's a little teaser. Was Tord running a penny?
He was running a penny.
He was running a penny. Did Tord have the 1 jet energy?
I don't believe so.
If he did, I guess we can look real quick. I was trying not to jump ahead.
Penny, yes. The turbo, no.
That was an interesting inclusion. I think the jet energy kind of gives you a little bit of flexibility in some situations where typically you could maybe get stuck or stalled out. The jet energy is always kind of fun, so I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, rounding out top 8, we had the Iron Thorns, 2 Regidragos, Raging Bolt, another Iron Thorns. Can you pronounce the name of our 7th place finisher in Singapore?
Let me take a look real quick.
How would you say their name? Well, I always like to say the name. Like, I'm into the players here, but I don't feel confident. I can say 8. Hannah got 8.
In Kynrinron.
Okay, there we go. Iron Thorns, and then Raging Bolt rounded out top 8. There was a Lugia, hovering. Your brother Brendan was there at the tournament. He was on Lugia, and he was not your brother. And then Charizard Pidgeot was in 10th place. So definitely something's lurking. Roguish decks. If you go to 15th, you see a little okie dokie there.
Oh, we saw a little bit of that in day 2 of Dansk as well.
We did. I mean, is this becoming a thing now? Is this card?
No, I don't. They were both. If you look at the deck list, both okie dokies were very differently run. This is just a fun deck that we would call like a B-C tier that can sneak in, hit the right route. It's good. It feels like more of what you would see at your league on a weekly night. But no, the thing I want to shout out is I'm always interested in what countries are showing up at other countries. So we have to give a shout out to Devansh Kopar from India coming in to Singapore from India and getting 19th. Shout out for the traveling record, man. Great showing.
Great showing. No, it was fun. I do. You hit the nail on the head. It's always fun to see these regions and who shows up in these predominantly, Singapore, the Philippines. It's traditionally just the people that live there are from that country. So it's fun to see some other people show up and bring Pokemon. It's a global game, Jared. We play a global game here.
We do.
All right. Dansk. Let's go to Dansk. That's where our boy. We kind of called Tord. We said
we did. I was thinking that the whole time. I was like, last episode we were on Mr. Tord Reklev for not having a high finish, and I saw him on stream, and I was like,
Jared, do we need more evidence that he listens to our show? Because clearly Tord is at the top of our listener list. He's watching on YouTube because he heard it and he got motivated. And I'm like all about it. Good job, Tord. You were so close. Second places for Tord is just like that's like him just entering a tournament. He doesn't really care. But it was cool to see him on a run. He was 8-0 day 1. And I think you give that man an 8-0 start, he's gonna make top 8. And then you just see where it goes. But Alberto Conti, who finished, it was top 4 at Lille. So this guy's on a run now. Top 4 now, first place on the Reggie Drago. Tell me what you saw. You watched these. I admittedly did not. You were hinting to the Bouffalant. What were you going to talk about there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Tord went on a tear in this tournament. A deck he's familiar with, a deck we've seen him running for a couple tournaments now. If you take a look at kind of his history with this deck, we see him playing it twice now. Playing it in Dansk and playing it in Dortmund. And in both situations, Corey, the man has a top 10 finish. And then all of these Charizard finishes as well. What's the commonality here? What is the common Pokemon in all of these decks, Corey?
It is I was trying to come up with a different Ursaluna. Blood Moon Ursaluna.
We're looking for Pidgeot.
Oh,
Pidgeot.
Yeah. Okay.
You just can't give this man options. Find any card in your deck as an ability. He knows what the right move is at the right time. But as we saw in the semis and in the finals, people are exploiting his decisions, as you were talking about in what version we were running.
Okay. How are they exploited? So you're talking about the Bouffalant specifically? This was exploited here?
Absolutely. Absolutely it was. In the semifinals match, you saw the Bennett Gardevoir player just pulling out that Bouffalant. Great. Get up in prizes. I'm going to pull up that Bouffalant. I know you only run 4 double colorlesses. You're not going to attack me with this. You have no way to get double colorlesses back from your discard pile. So are you going to burn one? Are you going to burn one of your 4 attacking opportunities potentially to keep retreating this, knowing that I can keep pulling and pulling? Are you going to find your Penny? Are you going to find your Turo? These were the questions that kept happening over and over and over again. And you saw Tord trying to play around it. And he played around it immaculately in Gardevoir. But eventually it catches up with you. And it's like anything in Pokemon. It's high risk, high reward. You're going to put all of your Pokemon, your basic colorless, 60 HP more. That turns Terapagos into a 290 HP monster. And it's not just HP, Corey. It's resistance to damage, right?
Well, yes, so I was about to ask that question. So against the Bennett, it wasn't taking any damage, right?
Right. So and they love that.
So he was just trying to stick toward and just deck him out, I guess.
No, and then he was killing had 2 Monkey Dories going on the bench and was just moving 60 damage every turn towards drawing, passing. Eventually, you can't do anything. You have no ability to cycle your supporters. You play your penny strategically. You play your Turo strategically. But with that Vanette sitting on the Gravity Stone, even a DCE doesn't get the retreat job done.
Oh yeah. Well, so but okay, so totally makes sense. That's a lot of clarity. But Tord won that match.
He did, and that's what I'm saying. That's why Tord's the best player. Like, they're figuring out ways around it. It's still a lot for Gardevoir to set up. But even in the finals, we saw just this ability to pull out the Bouffalant. And even if you're not attacking, it buys you time.
Yeah.
It buys your deck time. And if Tord doesn't have an instant response to that on his turn, it's just not, there's not always a way out. And Tord's playing perfectly to his outs, but it just didn't work out. But I will say to your credit, if you do look at the statistics, Terapagos was not in the first slide of day 1 most played decks. It was the number 1 most played deck in day 2.
Yeah, it's just the cream rises to the crop, or the crop rises to the cream. What is the phrase, Jared? It just does.
Cream of the crop.
So good. It's so good. It's consistent. I need to try the Bouffalant build. I've played a lot on like a heavier Dusknoir line and the 4/4 Hoot instead of the 3/3 and the 1/1 or 2/1 Dusknoir that Tord was running with the 2 Bouffalants. So I got to try it. I just don't like, looking at Tord's list here, he has the Prime Catcher, but there's no switch card, which does make him susceptible for these plays. Now, you're right, he has the Penny, which is probably the replacement for that, but you could still pull out a Hoot and have the same kind of result to the Bouffalant, technically, and you can't switch, or you can't penny the Hoot. So you can Turo it, but you can't penny it. So, yeah, but I just think at the end of the day, this thing gets on top. It has all the options to, like you mentioned, the Pidgeot finding 1 card every turn, any card you want. The strategic Noctowl plays are just what makes this so broken, because you're just getting 3 cards basically every turn that you want. And you really only need, you don't need many turns of that, right?
Right.
And so it's, it's only when the Noctowl is dropped from your hand, as long as you have a Terra in play, search your deck for any 2 trainer cards. You don't need to do that many times. So it's just so good. And in the hands of arguably the best player on the planet, these should be cakewalks to top 8s. And, Tord kind of let us down, right, in the last tournament in Lille. He wasn't on Terapagos. He was running Lost Box because he wanted to try hard in that one. But, when he was at Dortmund a month and a half ago, he got 9th on Terapagos Dusknoir. So, you put him back on this deck. It's awesome. So, but he was the only one in top 8, Jared, on this. Caleb Rogerson got 11th, so top 16 from the US, which was great. But outside of that, were there any other in top 32? Brent Walters in 31st place. So,
sure.
so 3 in top 32. So I don't know what that says, but if it was played a lot in day 2, that's obviously a good sign.
It is. And again, we always talk about just the diversity of the meta that we're in right now. It is a very good deck. It is not perfect. It is not even perfect most of the time. What it does is, I agree with you, when you have the Pidgeot and the Hoot Noctowl combo, you just have the options to get done what you need to get done without the risk of, like, what we see as Squawkabilly. It's a liability. It's a great card your first turn, but the Hoot and the Noctowl, they're not a liability. Nobody's going after 1 prize cards right now. Everything is a game of taking 2, sometimes 3 prize cards in a turn. So it just provides maximum support with minimal liability. It's the best support card in the format right now.
100% agreed. And we saw that turn the tide in, what Reggie? Yeah, it was Reggie Drago that ran a 1/1. Who was that? Was that Louisville? No,
that may have been Lil.
I'm forgetting, but it was in the Reggie Drago deck. It was that 1/1 Noctowl, and we talked about that being probably a game changer.
It was James Hill, winner of Lil, had the 1/1 Hoot Noctowl.
Clutch, man, just super clutch. But anyway, looking at the field, I thought, Magnus Peterson is a very good player. He finished top 4 on the Bennett Guardy. Did Tord play Magnus or did Tord play Matthias because those are they were top 8 on Bennett Guardy. Do you remember which player it was?
I do not remember off the top of my head, but
I
do have some talking points for you about the rest of the field in the tournament when you're ready.
Yeah, let me know. Go for it, man. I was just gonna say, I like the top 8 saying 2 Reggie Dragos, 2 Bennett's, 2 Iron Thorns, and then you had your Terapagos, and then Alex Scorpini. Oh, Alex Scorpini! You should have had this on Snorlax. You had it in front of you, and you blew it. But top 8, we did sneak a Stall player in, so that was good.
Oh my gosh, that's good because we thought Stall would win. We talked about that last episode. It did not. It's just running into some cards right now that it's having a very difficult time dealing with. And if your flutes aren't popping, your flutes ain't popping.
If your flutes aren't popping, don't come a knocking. Yeah,
don't come a knocking. Here's my personal view, and I kind of want to talk about each of these other 2 decks differently. As I look at the meta right now, clearly the most played deck in the format is our Raging Bolt. I don't think it's one of the strongest decks, even though we did see a win in Louisville. My opinion is, I agree with you. If you had to, ask me what my top 3 strongest decks are right now, I do think your Terapagos Dusknoir is in the top 3. But my other 2 decks, one of them, to my chagrin, is Regidrago. We've seen it win 2 back-to-back regionals.
Yeah.
I thought it was on the decline. It is in the decline in the numbers played compared to what we saw at Worlds, but it's winning. Yeah. I'm not sure why. Yeah. But my other one that I think is super strong and that a lot of stronger strategic players are going to come around to is Gardevoir Bennett.
Yeah.
Corey, this deck is so good. It's so not fun to play against.
No.
But as our resident Gardevoir player, why is this deck just miserable to play against and so good for the people that are playing it?
Oh, good questions. I think we'll say 3 things. I think it's always good to have 3 things. I think one is just a high level skill cap deck, and the other 2 points will allude to this. But that just makes it, a lot of people don't play it because it is tough to play. So therefore they don't really know how to play against it, right? If you're a person that practices on live, you're just, they get that Bennett turn 2 and item lock you and you have nothing, you're just going to quit. Like, you're just going to quit the game. You're not going to probably play it out. So you're not getting many reps against it for that reason. And maybe if you go to League, there aren't people playing this deck. So you're just not seeing reps against it because it's a very high level skill cap deck. So I think that's the first reason why it's amazing, because it's hard to play and therefore people don't have practice against it. The second thing, and this strategy has always been good. You tell me a format when this was in play and it wasn't good, Jared, you tell me, because it doesn't exist. The item lock game, when that became prevalent, Seismitoad, right? Item lock, Vileplume, item lock, Garb didn't item lock, but it punished you for playing items. So it might as well have item locked you. It's always been good. The item lock has won World so many times that it's just a really good. So now you have this with a 250 HP Pokemon, 1 Psychic Energy. You can even get cheeky if you go second and you get the Shuppet coin toss. The times I've played this deck online and you go second and get that heads, it's over. It's over. Like, if you're getting that. So, but you go first, you're giving your opponent 1 turn to play some items. So that's always frustrating in a format that, Jared, we've counted some of these decks, right? Have 24, 26 item cards. Like, some of these are just wild in items, and you're basically telling your opponent you can't play a third of your deck, So that's really good. But ultimately, not as we've touched on Dragapult, Dusknoir being a perfect deck. I maybe have mentioned that before, in the sense that there's so many damage counters going around everywhere that it confuses your opponents. Okay, that may have been why I said that. In this sense, it's not quite the same.
Just a clarification. You did say that. You did say. I never saw the clip get pulled out. I just wanted to make sure you did say that.
We had a fire and we lost the clip. I can't. You'd think in 2024 that wouldn't happen, but yeah, we had a fire, and the only thing we lost was that clip. But I'll paraphrase. And it's the reason because there's so many damage. It's confusing your opponent. Even we mentioned this in this episode a few weeks back. Even Raul, who's one of the top players in the world, I think got a little confused on how many damage counters Ryuki could put out in that tournament. So this deck, although not the same, clearly, when you're moving stuff with Monkey Dories, you're healing, you're moving damage counters to the other opponent, your opponent's thinking, well, this isn't even doing that much damage. I have time. But in reality, once you can kind of set damage counters around, it isn't terrible. Raging Bolt, 240, for example, right? Raging Bolt, 240 HP. You can move, 5 damage counters to that thing and then kill it with the Gardevoir hitting 190. Like, pretty easy with that kind of deck. So it gives you options to kind of chip away at your opponent. And I think your opponent gets lulled into the sense of thinking they're okay because this is just slowly chipping you down. But in reality, you're never really safe. And so, we saw in Louisville, Jared, Piper, who's a great player, she was on this deck because it's a high skill deck. Chip talks about this on his podcast with Azul. So if you can master a Banette Gardevoir deck and feel really good, and I'm not just talking about you understand sequencing, you have to play into every matchup multiple times because the way you misplace, and I talked about this, I think, on 2 episodes ago, but you misplace a Monkey Dory damage, you could lose the match, especially at these high level when it's top 8, you're playing against players that know what they're doing. You misplay that, you're not gonna. You will be short damage. I've been there. It is hard. You have to game plan 3 or 4 turns ahead, but you get it down, and it's so good. Was it Lil where we saw a lot of these too, or what was the other? Was it Lil? I think it was.
Yeah, we've seen it creeping into more and more, right? Because we're always used to seeing some variation of Gardevoir, right? But that's what's so sneaky about these decks, and what got a lot of wins is you get so caught up in battling the Banette and the Monkey Dory damage. And then they'll even bring out that Gardevoir right now because that turns it into a 220, 250 attacker with the Monkey Dories. You totally forget they drop a Drifloon. They drop a Scream Tail. And you're like, oh, crap. Yeah. Like, it does that too, and it only needs to run 2 extra cards. So it's just so good.
Yeah, and it's like, as Dusknoir got more prevalent to the point where should it be banned? I don't know. Maybe it should be banned. It's really good. Everyone's rare candy in it. So what do you do to stop it? You shut down the item cards, right? And so it just has. That's what we love about the game of Pokemon, right? Something starts to get overpowered, and then other things come in for checks and balances. And so Banette Gardevoir is that checks and balance right now to these high level item decks, especially the rare candy stuff, and just completely nullifies the Dusknoir play. Because you can get to a point like I was going to say the Scream Tail, you could drop 2 Dusknoirs, you could Duskulls, Monkey Dory, one of them dead, and then Scream Tail the other one. Now you've opened the items back up again for your opponent, but they can't even rare candy unless, you have a Thornton play or something like that. But it just is, it controls the game. I have actually, I'm looking at I created a form here to the committee. It's still pending. I'm trying to get this into the control deck world. I'm arguing this is a control deck. I understand it puts out damage. I get it. There's too many energy cards in this to be a true control deck.
Very frowned upon in the control. Damage is very frowned upon in the control committee.
It's very frowned upon, and I don't think it'll get passed. But I'm pushing it through right now. I've got it through one side of the control house. Now I got to get it through the other side. So we'll see. It would be nice to add this to our repertoire if we could get a Banette as a control deck. I won't say Gardevoir. We'll say Banette. That'd be nice.
That's fair, because, you were running... There was a time where you were running Banette Frostlass till Kingdom Come online, not at a tournament, but you were trying to make Banette happen.
I didn't think it could be beat. It's just too good. It was so good. And then Raging Bolt showed up, and that wasn't fun. Without the Gardevoir play, the Raging Bolt's a little tough, straight up Banette, and Frostlass. But yeah, no, it's great. Item lock, Jared, always good. Hashtag always good.
Always good. I like it. Well, let's round out the tournament. Just looking through, talking about some decks, maybe some spice, what you see coming, what's falling off. What are you seeing as you look at our tournament here in Dansk? What other trends are you picking up on?
I think it's still wise to talk about Lost Box. I know it was dead forever, and then it had a resurgence. Tord was on it, and Lil. We're starting to see it played more. you look at here, we had one in 10th place. And then I'll say friend of the podcast, even though it's not him, but I'm assuming Brennan Cameraman is brothers with Owen Cameraman, who's been on the podcast. He may have been on my world's selection team when we played that I did beat you. And he was on Lost Box. So we're starting to see some Lost Box creep in. And if you get that deck into some of these players' hands, Andrew Hedrick and others that are very good on it, I mean, gosh, having Lost Box back in the format, always a good thing, right? All those comfies. So I don't know that. And then you still see some golden goes here, Jared. They're still creeping. So it's a diverse field, even though we had, not a diverse top 8 necessarily, but there are still multiple decks that are still making way. Raging Fire, Gouging Fire. Is it Raging Fire? What do they call it? Gouging Fire?
Yeah, Gouging Fire is the one I was going to point out. Like,
yeah, what
Gouging
do you think
Fire, I think it's strong. Anytime you have a basic that can hit big numbers, Fire is strong right now. You have Mela, you have Magma Basin, you can even Crispin onto it. It has a lot of support in the trainer world that can make this deck go. 260 is a great number. You can find other ways to get to 280 and those other marks. So I don't know, man. This is traditionally what I would call a Japanese one-round deck, where you're just swinging for the fences. And we've seen Gouging Fire be so successful in Japan and other tournaments. But 3 decks in day 2 is not a small number. Because you compare that with some of the other things, and well, there were only 5 Charizard decks. So are we going to say that Charizard had a big showing, but Gouging Fire didn't because there's only a 2 deck difference? I don't know. It's very interesting to me. Gouging Fire is super interesting. Miraidon, we saw some Miraidon on string. And still this cornerstone Ogerpon is just kind of hanging out back there, trying to find and get the right cards. It's lurking. It's lurking in the darkness, just like all of you stall players do.
We lurk. We just wait, Jared. Just it's not prevalent yet. Okay, and then we pounce. A top 8 finish is a little scary because it's people are going to talk about it, but that's fine. That's fine. Just we need to buy time for San Antonio. I don't know why. One particular person might be wanting to play it, and it just needs to do really poorly until then. So, either that or it's Sylveon, one of the two. So we'll see.
I wouldn't run Sylveon, not with that monster Duraludon coming on.
Archelodon. Okay,
Archelodon, whatever.
I'll mention one other deck because I have to, and I know. Greninja, in my history on this podcast and my history of playing, I know we talk about Greninja quite a bit. So we don't ever get to talk about my second love, which is Garchomp. But Jared, 85th place by my boy. Oh man, Theodore, not Theodore. It could be Theodore. 85th place. He was rocking Okie Dokie with a 3-2 Garchomp EX line. 3 Gible, 2 Garchomp. Am I missing something? Is this even good? I don't think I've stared at this for way too long. What's the strategy? I'm confused.
I don't know. The other Okie Dokie one that showed up in our Singapore Premier Ball made a little more sense to me. You're using Crispin. You're getting Darkness energies on there to use its ability to up your damage and up your health. This one just seemed like it was going for it. And I don't know, like it was a secondary attacker. Maybe you're changing the prize map up a little bit. Garchomp has free retreat. It's not a risk once it's up and running. I'm not really sure. I think some of the magic here is, fighting, as we talked about right when our Stellar Crown set came out. It's a good weakness. A lot of everything colorless is usually weak to it, except back in the day when colorless was weak to itself, which was the stupidest thing ever.
Yeah, that was dumb.
I'm going to run Garchomp. It's weak to itself. Great.
But Garchomp could make itself do that extra move that was 40 for whatever type of energy you had on
it.
Anyway.
Just dumb. It's dumb.
Yeah. I mean, in the Blissey matchup, super unfortunate, but we won't have to go back 14 years and talk about that. Or 17, long time ago. I see the point. They're trying to accelerate the energy, but I just think it's a lot to commit to just do that when, like you said, there are Crispins that you can play. You still have to get the dark energy on it, but you run the luminous energy. The water, if you could tell me fire, like if you needed a water type to have good weakness against something, like a fire was really prevalent, okay, you're kind of swaying me here a little bit, but I don't know. I don't think it's enough. I think it's so cool. And I'm not down in Theodore. I'm going to put this together and play it. And then maybe by next episode, I'll let you know if I'm amazed or not. But I was just glad to see Garchomp. Man, when's the last time? You haven't seen a Garchomp in a day 2 of a major tournament in I don't even know how long. So, Lux Chomp could have been that long ago. So very cool. That was my last thing I was going to mention on this. I just like seeing some rogue stand out that was Garchomp.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, let's transition over to our education moment, which we've talked about it a lot this episode, so we're going to keep talking about it. Corey, if you are a high-level player, you know something that I think other players don't know, and that is if you aren't winning, the best thing that you can do for yourself is buy yourself time. Right?
Yeah.
So many times we view cards that pull out, or like our new Gravity Stone that amplify retreat cost. How many times have people won game because they have bossed something out, because they've prime catchered something out, and it bought them a turn? It bought them 2 turns. Sometimes we're sitting with our opening hand. It stinks. We have a boss's order in hand and we're like, oh, GG. No. Yeah. No. Here's my rhyme for today. If you can't lick them, stick them. That's what you got to do. That's what you got to do. If you're not going to win the match, if you're not just crushing them, you have to look at your outs as buying yourself time. That is what we saw in the semis, in the finals this time, is I'm going to pull out that Bouffalon. I'm going to sit on it. Yeah. Or there's a lot of decks right now that are running Gravity Stone, saying, hey, I'm going to pull you out and I'm going to sit. I'm going to buy my time. Some decks do that on purpose, like we talked about with Bennett. But other decks need to leverage it as a way to either get themselves to the late game where they are strong, or like we said, give me a turn or 2. Maybe I'll top deck something. Maybe I already used my draw mechanics this turn. I need them again next turn. So I'm going to pull out your 2 retreater, your 2 retreat Pokemon. Yeah. Talk about that. I know you've done this to people and have had success with it. Why is this such an important understanding for good players?
Oh, it's just, I mean, you want to always have in mind what all your outs are. This kind of topic gets wrapped into an educational moment you presented maybe a year ago, which was like, never give up, right? There could always be a way to win. And Jared, I mean, it's like, we'll talk about Gardevoir. I mean, Gardevoir can get stuck, right? It can, if you go up against a player that gets just cooking, they're discarding all their psychic energy, which is what they want to do. Maybe you force them to play a Turo, and if they're out of super rods, you can pull out Greninja, pull out Manaphy if they've dropped it, and they can't do anything anymore. There's even opportunities where you can yank Curlia into the active if they've dropped Gardevoir, and they actually can't do anything if all their energy's in play. So Gardevoir is an example where that is a win condition to yank out something in that matchup is a very last resort. But never giving up is huge in this kind of scenario, because typically when your opponent gets on top of you very quickly, they're burning through resources and they're not thinking, oh man, what if they pull out my Noctowl and I can't retreat it? They're just like going. And so sometimes this is a very nice counterplay that can really change the momentum. Most times it's a last-ditch effort. It's a Hail Mary play. But if you're an NFL fan or a college football fan, Jaden Daniels, Hail Mary, beat the Chicago Bears. Our Baylor Bears sadly lost to Colorado on a Hail Mary. So these plays work. It doesn't mean don't do them, but they're just last resort things. But yeah, man, I mean, and obviously you mentioned control decks like Stall and Pidgeot Control kind of live on this. Mawile wants to get things that can't retreat, but this tactic can work as long as you've kind of identified what your opponent has played. Check their discard pile. See how many, if they've played a Turo, if they've played a Switch, if they run Prime Catcher, is that in the discard pile? You have to kind of account for those things if you're going to try to pull this play off.
Absolutely. Yeah, man, I 100% agree with you. For some, it's a strategy. For some, it's a last-ditch effort. But we have seen so many games on stream where this has bought enough time to get you back in the game. And that's what you have to remember. Boss Order seems like such an offensive card, and it is such an offensive card. It could be one of the best defensive cards that you ever play. to get you through. Turn your offense into defense to sometimes know what your outs are. You're right. More often than you're not, your opponent will probably have a response to it, but not always. Mm-hmm. Know your outs. If you can't lick them, stick them, Corey. If you can't lick them, stick them.
Brought to you by the post office. Lick the stamps. Lick the stamps. Actually, you don't lick them anymore, do you? You just put them on there. They're stickers.
Yeah, they're self-adhesive now. It's one of my brand new world.
Brand new world. One of my favorite, if you can't lick them, stick them plays is yanking the Pidgeot and like mawiling it. Because they're like, oh, they can search for their Turo. Fine, play your Turo. Like, pull the Pidgeot up. Now you have to rear candy it again. Like, that is like one of my favorite low-key plays to pull off if they don't have like a switch card. If you know they have the Turo, make them play the Turo then on the Pidgeot.
Absolutely.
Don't pull out Manaphy. They want a Turo that. Don't pull out Greninja. Pull out the Pidgeot. And then you really like putting your opponent in a very awkward position to just take that out of play. So anyway,
I agree.
Never give up.
Never give up. Lick them, lick your opponent, stick your opponent, whatever you got to do.
Yep.
Let's talk real quick, Corey, before we wrap up, what we have coming up. And really the focus of the world turns to Latin America. This upcoming weekend, we will be paying a lot of attention to what is happening in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Yep.
And then quickly following that, Sao Paulo, our first internationals of the year.
Huge. Surging Sparks will be legal. It's the first IC. All the big dogs turn out for this. In this new format, Jared, the way you qualify for Worlds now, if you're not going to these ICs, you really have no shot. Like, just plain and simple, you have no shot of making Worlds as a qualifier in your region if you are not attending an international competition. That's just it. So everyone that's going to be here are going to be the same people you're going to see at Worlds. Unless you can just Azul will probably go in and win Sacramento, and then you won't ever see him again until World. So he'll probably prove me wrong. But this will be great, man. I cannot wait for this set. This will be a fun. So many A specs. We've previewed these cards on the past episodes. Go back and list or watch them on YouTube. So this will be fun. But yeah, Buenos Aires leads up to LAIC in a region, Jared, that has the reigning world champion. So this is the region. You can't beat them. Lick them, I don't know.
I love it. I love it. So yeah, this weekend, Buenos Aires, next weekend, Sao Paulo. Then it shifts back to the US. We will have Sacramento, and we will round out our month actually back in Europe, in Stuttgart, in Germany.
Oh, one of our favorites. Jared, what wins? What wins this weekend? In Argentina, what wins?
It is spicy down there. I think we'll see something that's in the top meta. It just feels like another Raging Bolt is going to come crashing through with maybe some sticky little changes that we're not ready for.
It's been a minute. Dragapult comes back into the fold.
Okay.
The perfect deck. Dusknoir pitching. Dragapult Dusknoir takes it down in Buenos Aires this weekend.
I love it. Well, we're super excited to watch that. Thank you, everybody, for another episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, set up notifications for us, as one day we look forward to having an uninterrupted podcast. In a dual studio setup. We look forward to it.
We can't wait. Until then, Jared, you know what?
What?
We'll catch you later.
You can find us at roguemedianetwork.com. Teach Me Pokemon Podcast. Come and dive with us.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.